Well, happy, healthy, beautiful day, friends. Hope you're doing awesome today. This call, we are going to focus today on smashing stress with functional medicine. This is National Stress Month in the US. And you know what? As I mentioned earlier on a quick live I did, it should be a focus for everyone's day, not a month of the year. So, are we accomplishing our goals when it comes to getting things done? Are we aware of our stress levels? Are we doing a good job? I don't even know if I could use the word managing stress because it's not managed. I think it's really controlled and it's approached in more of an aggressive manner with some kind of strategies you can apply every single day and not just, something you treat quite casually. So we're going to revisit some of the subjects we were talking around stress with Dr. Bob. This is a particularly powerful topic for many people, depending on where you come from as well. Maybe it's not so well dealt with, or it's something that's brushed aside and not really focused on too much. But we want to really open up the conversation. If you guys have any questions, we would love to see them in the chat. So feel free to ask questions as we go along, and we will answer them as we go. We will prioritize leaving those to the end. Of course, we have Dr. Bob Rakowski with us. It's been a tough week for Dr. Bob with his rotator cuff surgery, but it just shows you once again, he doesn't use the excuse of pain will stop me from being showing up for one and adding value to the world. So great to have you here once again, Dr. Bob, talking about stress and smashing with functional medicine. So I want to welcome you, first of all, to the call and just say thank you once again for taking the time out to educate people that show up and want to really make a difference in their own health.
Yeah, I like the way you led into that. And thanks for the great intro. Pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. And the best way I found not to suffer is to stay productive, to stay adding value. A few days after surgery, that's hard to do on occasion, but I've got great support. So thank you for being here. And you're right. When you start looking at stress, we probably need to essentially make ourselves stronger than try to make our lives easier. And that's even Stoic wisdom. So, the better you are, the better rested you are, the better nourished you are, the more fit you are, the more at peace in yourself and your relationships, likely stress kind of just washes right off of you. But unfortunately, that's not most people. But I think everybody can take a better step in a right direction, starting now, maybe with a deep breath. That's a pretty easy way. Even the Navy SEALs do that. If someone's shooting at them, they're advised to take a deep breath. Imagine that. So, that kind of training can go a long way because you will center your body, mind, and spirit and hopefully make a better choice.
Absolutely. There's something quite, I would say, hyper present about being calm around chaos. Particularly if you see people are doing poorly in a situation, maybe they've got into a road rage with someone or an argument, or someone's just on a short fuse or having a particularly rough day and just kind of blows up. I find it's interesting to observe ourselves as someone is going through something like that it shows us what we can control, and that really have to control ourselves first of all, and then see if we can bring our best selves to the table to control or help another person in a situation where they're really struggling. And I find that's interesting. It's something that the law enforcement I know in the US, Jocko Willink was talking about that as well, is something that, well, it's not just the US, it's everywhere, is someone in a position of authority like that who is able to, soldiers as well, be able to be around a stressful situation, breathe and be calm and just have that emotional intelligence and awareness that I have control here. I'm not going to get sucked into a situation and act out of emotion, or particularly fear, because the fear response is usually where people get hurt or unfortunately killed, because the perception of what's actually going on, because of shortening of breath or excitedness in the nervous system, they lose sight of what's actually happening. And, I've seen that in working in security over the years, Dr. Bob, as well, just observing people that I was doing that for a short time in my life. But it's an interesting thing when you observe body language and how people behave around other people and how people change when you're courteous. Being nice goes a long way. I mean, my dad used to say, actually, in a couple of days, it'll be his 6th anniversary. But he said one thing, Dr. Bob, it's nice to be nice. And I think if you can just instill that care in other people, it can help people with their stress.
Yeah, there was a famous author, and I think he went down on the Titanic. I believe his name was Huxley, but he said the greatest thing he learned in his life of lessons was probably the best thing that we could do is just be a little kinder to one another. So I really love you bringing into that to the mix, because you can diffuse a lot with a smile and with a kind word, and as long as it's sincere. Occasionally, you smile at someone, and if they're in the wrong mood, they might take it the wrong way. Are you laughing at me? I actually had a flight attendant tell me that on a flight one time. She said, "Are you laughing at me?" And I said, "No, I'm actually smiling." She said, "Why are you smiling at me?" I said, "Because you're beautiful." And she was just so taken aback by that, but it calmed her down a little bit. And you know, why not smile at everybody? But hopefully it's a sincere one, right? It's smile from the heart, not necessarily from the lips. And there was a movie line, right?
Yeah.
Smile with your eyes. Eric, you probably mastered that one. I'm still working on that one, but
yeah, it's a funny one, because sometimes we can fall into that response of, almost like it's an automatic response, but yeah, that the eyes don't move. It's funny, it's one of those things as well, that it's a defense mechanism for people as well, because I think if you smile at someone in a situation where they're not sure of themselves or whatever is going on in their lives, it can very easily be taken in the wrong way,
Yep.
So I tend to go with a smile and a nod and just give people the benefit of the doubt. And sometimes, if someone brushes that off, there was a time where I would go, well, what's this person's problem, But then I realized you don't actually know what their problem is. They could have lost a family member. They could have lost a job. They could be completely zoned out. They could be dealing with unknown levels of stress. So that's a lesson in itself, is, if you're not acknowledged, that don't get stressed out about it. If people don't want to acknowledge you, then that's okay. You've taken the step. You feel good about yourself, and, bless them. They're running on a deficit. Maybe somehow you can help them later on down the road. But just want to touch on, Dr. Bob, the process. So we're talking about the emotional response of stressful situations or stressful people, or things that may happen that take you by surprise, and how you can just take that breath and that awareness of just step back from a situation. And I suggest you step back from a lot of situations, because you can see clearer. When you're in something, you can be blinded by it. But if you just step back and take a breath and focus on the solutions of whatever the situation is, you would be much better off focusing your energy that's required to get that job done. But when it comes to the process inside the body, what's actually happening, Dr. Bob, that's such a destructive process then for people on a chemical level, and how does it affect them in other areas of their lives?
When we look at the stress response, we could just consider it, first and foremost, maybe relabel it a fear response, and a fear that you're being threatened in a certain way. And your body has a way of handling that, and it's always defensive, and it's never proactive. And if it's something that goes on for a long period of time, you'll actually kill yourself with how your body is responding. I sadly heard of a case of a gentleman that, had such severe pain from dropping an object on his toe. As the pain escalated, he had a heart attack and died. So you can let a life pain from a life circumstance, if you're out of balance, really carry you a long way. But if we just go with what happens, the body says, the only thing that's important to me right now is fighting this enemy or running as fast as I can. Keep in mind, you don't need higher level thought or even joy to fight or flee. And that might even be getting in the way. So higher level thought, joy, that's going to shut off. The digestive tract takes a lot of energy. That's going to shut off. Detoxification, filtering the blood, that takes a lot of energy. That shuts off. Immune system protecting us, that shuts off. You start shutting off all these things. Sex steroids shut off. Metabolism shuts off. And we can handle that for moments at a time, like the zebra being chased by the lion. But as Robert Sapolsky said so amazingly in his book, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, the reason that they don't get ulcers is, hey, they know that this is how life works. If over the next minute I effectively protect myself, fight and flee, I'll survive. And if I don't, well, then the next life is waiting for me. Now I don't know if they have that level of conscious thought, but either way, they know this is not going to be prolonged. And here's the fascinating thing. The lion and the zebra if they're both alive at the end of the chase, they might be at the same water hole, drinking and recovering, and just saying, okay, I got you today. Maybe you get me tomorrow, that kind of thing. But either way, they're not going to worry about it. They're just going to go on with their day. So, can we learn from the animals? You bet. Is higher level thought our friend? It can be, unless we create circumstances that we're constantly on guard about. And sharing the slides, the first system that seems to be negatively affected, and I don't know that we can call it one. I lectured at a conference this weekend. One of the great speakers, Dr. Tracy Stroud, she says, what, the body doesn't have any fences. So even though they used to talk about something called psychosomatic, the mind affecting the body, they suddenly came up with this term called psychoneuroimmunology. The thoughts we think affects our nervous system and our immune system. Now they've expanded that to psychoneuroimmunoendocrinology. And now you begin to realize that, wait a minute, it's our immune system, it's our thoughts, it's our brain, it's our hormones. And what impact would that be on our body? Every single cell. And in a distress circumstance, if it goes on for too long, bad thing. But if you plan your stresses, like you and I are going to train, that's a planned stress, and hopefully we will learn to enjoy it. But we know if we go into it saying, okay, I'm going to put my body through a little, but on the back half, I'm going to come off better. And if people can love that process, all growth does occur outside of our comfort zone. That's for sure.
I love that. And we've heard this on from multiple points of view, and from yourself over the years, Dr. Boyer. One of the first videos I saw from you was around cancer and the deadly quartet, and how that environment shapes the cell activity and shapes our health. And if we are not creating an environment for health, we are actually contributing to an environment of illness. So that we're constantly, what's the term you mentioned before? Was it Dean Ornish? Was it cancer ring? That it should be a verb now. That
Yeah. Listen, cancer is a normal process in the body, but we have checks and balances where it should never get out of control. So the question is not, do you have cancer? The question is, are you cancering? Are you creating the environment that it grows? But Eric, those two slides that you showed most recently, we've known for over 50 years that stress is immunosuppressive. And in the medical literature, I just did a cancer talk earlier in the year. And it turns out it took till 2023 that the first time I found it in the medical literature said that, oh yeah, we have no doubt that stress is a major trigger of cancer, even though, heck, I had mentors telling me about that nearly 4 decades ago. And you start having conversations with it. So you might ask, well, why in the world aren't they acknowledging that? Well, reality is they don't have much to do about it. And if you're giving a toxic therapy, that in and of itself is a stress on the body. Not that toxic therapies are never indicated, but if you can make a non-toxic, choice, you're going to be better off for it and less distressed, and probably recover faster.
And speaking of recovery, one of the biggest dampeners on recovery seems to be inflammation. One of the biggest destructive forces we have going on inside of us, the biggest stressors, is inflammation, whether it's noted, whether you can feel it, whether it's through cognitive decline or confusion or digestive upset. It seems that inflammation is kind of that timeless enemy that's just going to constantly be a fight for us. And through the right kinds of nutrition, the right kinds of physical activity, and the right kinds of grace to give yourself significant rest, this is a constant balancing act for us to keep on the straight and narrow when it comes to controlling inflammation. Because if you're someone who's quite active and all of a sudden they burn the candle at both ends, so to speak, quite literally, then you're going to be left in a stressful situation that you're going to have to rest from. And that's just the hardened truth of it all, that we have to be very mindful of what our limits are and what we need to eat in order to keep this inflammation under control.
Well, you said a lot of things that are very, very valuable there. And I'm gonna even go back now decades, because one of the presidents of Texas Chiropractic College, his name was W.D. Harper, and he had a master's degree in engineering from MIT. And he had a very simple definition of health. He said, you're healthy when function is in time with need. So when your body has a need for inflammation, it has it. And when the need for that inflammation is resolved, it resolves it. And his definition of illness was function out of time with need. So, cells should divide, but only a certain amount. And they always should respect their neighbors. But what do cancer cells do? They keep dividing. They don't respect their neighbors. So division, normal process, but cancer out of time with need. Inflammation after an injury, infection, whatever, until it's resolved, great thing. But it's this chronic inflammation. And you said some interesting things. Do we feel it in our mind? Do we feel it in our body? Do we feel it in our digestive system? Do we feel it in our immune system? I'm going to suggest that depends on how in tune you are with you, because I promise you it's a negative for all those things if it's going on too much, too long.
What kind of markers then would you look for, Dr. Bob, in your clinic? You've kind of excelled as an expert in functional medicine, combining these actual practical practices that you would use, because I guess there are some practices out there that aren't as effective as others, and they don't have as much roots in ancient wisdom when it comes to, let's say, Chinese medicine or acupuncture, even chiropractic for yourself as well. What are some of the things that you've kind of looked at over the years that are the primary markers for these stress responses in the body?
Well, let's just go with very general before we start getting to labs. So Dr. Jeff Bland and I, he's the founder of functional medicine. In 1998, we taught a series around the world called The Inflammatory Disorders. That was the title of the seminar. And then the subtitle was the top 2 complaints that any patient will see any doctor anywhere are pain and fatigue. Both of these are related to inflammation. Pain gets your attention, and it probably should. You probably need to address that and do something about it. But fatigue, how many people do you know, say, I've got all the energy I need to do all that I want, every day that I want, any time that I want. And I think we can count those people on one hand, or at least as a very small percentage of our population. So is there an inflammatory process going on? Sure. Could it be caused by trauma? People are usually aware of that. Could it be caused by toxicity? It absolutely can be, but people are not aware of that. Could it be due to nutrient insufficiency? It could be, and people aren't aware of that. So it's fascinating that, one, if you're not testing your body, you probably don't know what you're capable of. But as soon as you do start testing yourself, you're going to realize you need to dot some I's. You need to cross some T's. You need to eat right, drink right, think right, move right, sleep right, poop right, talk right every single day. But if we get sophisticated with lab markers, well, then we can look at things like high sensitivity C-reactive protein, erythrocyte sedimentation rate, something called ferritin. Even if you do a complete blood count and you see an elevation of the white cells, and especially something called neutrophils, that tends to be an earlier response to inflammatory process. But it's almost a lost art looking at blood. I've been listening to a lot of doctors lately and understand that 2021, 1 in 5 people that were in medicine left medicine. And one guy said his reason for leaving was he felt his hands were tied. He knew something was helpful to the patient, but he couldn't do it. I'm glad he's still in it because he's got the heart to be there. But ultimately, what's the most stressful? When we feel like we're not in control of really what's going on. So how do we take control? Well, the Stoics would tell us this: control the controllables. Take that deep breath, work on getting a posture, prioritize a good night's sleep, move in a way that you enjoy, that nourishes your body, mind, and spirit. And as Og Mandino would say, zealously inspect all things that you allow to enter your mind, your heart, your soul, and your body. We do that. That's a formula for health, success, and happiness. But do people need comprehensive blood work to figure out they're inflamed? Almost never. But sometimes they want to know, how bad am I? And holy cow, sometimes people are so far gone, you're glad you run it because you ran the test, because that's finally what they need. You keep on this path, you're going to have something probably not very good in your not too distant future. Let's get that under control. And often we do that with a stress reset, but always, let's just call it a mind reset. Hey, listen, are you willing to take charge of your life and how you live it and how you move forward in the world from here forward? And if you are, then guess what? We've got a lot of ways that we can work together to make that happen.
Beautiful. Just a quick aside, Dr. Bob, your connection is dropping out a little bit. I'm not sure if it's jumping, if you need to realign your connection mid-call. I don't know if that's a possibility. You might get kicked off the call is the only thing. But not to worry, we can pop you back into the stream. It's just we lost a little bit of what you were saying there.
Let's look. You know what's interesting, Eric? I actually don't need to be in my, I guess in my, you might call it my studio, my office. I think if I go downstairs, I'll be closer to the Wi-Fi. And so I'm going to do that.
Sure.
Why not? We've got that.
We're going to do a detour or a tour of Casa de Rogowski. Nice, nice. Well, when we're walking, or when you're going about your stroll down, Dr. Bob, I'll just maybe share another question, on the call with you. The markers that someone would get from their GP, correct me if I'm wrong, but is different than if they were going to a functional medicine doctor.
Well, maybe the way they're read would be different, and maybe the ranges that they would use would be different. But, there's no magic functional marker nor medical marker, for inflammatory process other than the ones that we mentioned. So different ways of getting, high sensitivity C-reactive protein. That's that they also call it cardiac C-reactive protein because inflammation is a top risk factor for heart disease. But we might want a tighter range. We might say, okay, if you have a level 3 or above, well, you're going in the wrong direction. But they might say, well, 2.5, you're fine. Now, the standards we use, we want you less than 1 on that particular marker. And so, I've taught diagnostics around the world, coming up on 30 years. And I would always use a reference from the medical literature that would say this: standard diagnostic tests look for pathology, not function. So I've never found anybody that we couldn't make better. No one that's functioning absolutely perfectly. But dysfunction precedes pathology. And how long do people want to let that go, before they actually address it? And so the conversation they'll have with me or another functional medicine practitioner is, perfect is here, dead is here, you're in between. And, you might say, on this parameter, you're closer to dead. I think we should work on that, and where you're close to perfect, good, maybe get a little better. But, your weaknesses will take you down. That's for sure.
Awesome. Just that, that area of the house is you jump again, Dr. Bob, close to the front door. Just maybe if you find a spot to plonk yourself down there, probably would be easy. It's just for the connection. If you have somewhere that's comfortable for you to sit, would be awesome. But I want to just mention about fat as well. This is coming. Yeah, here you go. This is something that's coming in this time of year. There you go. Make yourself at home there. The response then to stress when it comes to body composition, people coming into a more beach time of the year, and people like to just get their skin out there and feel more comfortable in their skin. And a part of that is a healthy approach to fat loss and really addressing that as a priority. And, it shouldn't be the case that, coming into the summertime that it's more of a focus, but that's just how people are. It's not that people don't have the discipline. It's just that their priorities may have shifted slightly. But when people are stressed, I'd love you just to mention about the process of fat gain if people are constantly in that stress cycle and don't prioritize stress as one of their top fat loss strategies.
Well, let me just go with the high level hormonal circumstance. So we got a section of our brain that's really monitoring a lot of things called the hypothalamus. Then we have what's called the master gland called the pituitary. And then the connection between the hypothalamus, the sensing part of the brain, the pituitary, another directing part of the brain, and the adrenal glands, the part of the body that releases the stress response. They literally call that the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. But it's those are not the only things that are being controlled there. Oh, I see I covered my hammer there with my hand. It also simultaneously controls the thyroid, which is the metabolic rate of 99% of the tissue of the body. And also it controls the gonads, the sex steroids. And think about it, I don't know how distracted women are by sex steroids, but we men, and I'll speak for myself, and my gosh, when we're hitting puberty up until a certain age, it's like our sex steroids run our life. In fact, one of my mentors called it small molecules disease, because if you don't learn to control your urges, you might get yourself in trouble. So it really is a battle at that point in time. But now, so when you're in a fight or flight mode, well, you're not going to be reproducing. That's for sure. That's not the time to say, hey, let's start a family. But also, interestingly enough, your body needs fast energy, and burning fat is very slow energy. So they shut down the thyroid. Stress shuts down the thyroid by multiple mechanisms because the energy is just too slow to be life-saving. And then over time, if you keep that going for an extended period of time, we've talked before about something called cortisol resistance. And quite simply, the body keeps releasing the stress hormones. It doesn't know how to control it, and even has lost its own self-regulation. So the body just keeps getting beat up by it. And so body fat accumulates, brain, people are not able to focus. Joy, they experience far less of that. Their brain can be so excitatory that it can certainly interfere with sleep. And, we just talked about sleep not too many episodes ago, but very, very simply, simple quote from the book, Why We Sleep: the shorter your sleep, the shorter your life. So it makes sense that we would prioritize that. And by the way, when you're not sleeping, well, now you're up, you're running on stress hormones. And most of the time, people look for a quick energy fix. They don't say, oh, let me have a, wonderful piece of steak and avocado. They might, want a piece of fruit, which would be a better choice. Or people often reach for processed carbohydrates. Not a good choice, but they have the problem that'll actually give them a boost of dopamine and make their brain thinks things are better, when in reality, they're not better. And they might be worse for it.
More often than not, they will, right? Because of the
Yep.
the downside of the refined food and how that responds in the blood sugars and how you feel about yourself. There's something that happens that I think that accountability marker we have for ourselves. There's no fooling yourself. If you're really doing well with self-discipline, then you acknowledge that I can be flexible within the structure. But if you're really struggling, it's chaos and it's an emotional response to stress. And usually that resorts to that whole comfort eating, if that's even a thing to describe. But I guess
they've renamed it, Eric.
myself.
They've renamed it discomfort eating. And I think that's a lot more
Yeah.
accurate, because that short, quick fix has much bigger downside to it than people really ever thought of before. So yeah, it's no longer comfort eating. Comfort eating would be that steak and avocado. Discomfort eating is the processed stuff that none of us should be putting in our bodies.
Yeah. You work with some of the most elites, Dr. Bob, that have come into your practice, and it's got to be in a colorful career so far, with some of these world champions like Evander Holyfield, Yao Ming, Tyson Gay, Bianca Knight. It's a long list of athletes you've been able to help, and that's always got to be fun. But whether you're an elite athlete or someone who is being sent home to die, what are some of the top 3 things you would do immediately with that person? Obviously, everyone is different, but if you were to name like 3 simple adjustments or quick adjustments you would make with those individuals, what would you assess that to be?
Well, almost universal is a stress reset. So a lot of people think that, these superstars are beyond resilient. And they certainly can deal with a lot more physicality than a lot of people, but I don't think we begin to realize how much distress is in their world. So when we do a stress reset, melatonin, theanine, Ganoderma spores, or for those of us that, work with Camilla and Dreamcoast.se, a Swedish company, they put the melatonin, theanine, different forms of B12, other adaptogens in their stress reset drops, that and the reishi spores every single waking hour. That's a protocol that we use for decades, and the recent stress reset is an update from that. But, nearly every pro that I've worked with, we've done a stress reset, we've done a detox. And then, by the way, we've also addressed structural balance. And that's how these elites get better really, really fast. So stress reset, we might call that mind. Detox, that's going to be in terms of the chemistry of creating the chemistry of success. And then structural balance, well, that's going to give them the physical capacity to work harder, better, in a safer range. And isn't that what we're always trying to do? And you'd be surprised that just a little tweak in these elites, they could hurt something bad. So being fine-tuned, hey, world championships, not being fine-tuned and using that much energy could be the end of your career.
Yeah, I wanted to just share this slide as well because we're in an era now where our food is so nutritionally depleted. We have to supplement. We have to get more. We're not just getting from our food. We have to get the highest quality of nutrition into us and be creative within that process and a number of ways of doing that. But when you have your Rakowski nutrition pyramid here, how many people realistically, Dr. Bob, that come into your clinic are mastering this structure? Or do you believe a lot of people are still running on a severe deficit, which is in turn contributing to more stress?
Well, there's no doubt that nearly everybody's running on a deficit. There was a study in one of the international journals of sports nutrition that they said 99.9% of people walking around are measurably deficient in some nutrient that would be, their body be better off if it were at a more ideal level. And then there was an article called, in the journal Advances in Therapy. And after they actually looked in people's bodies at the nutrient status at the cellular level, and then gave them good food, they realized that food was not enough to reestablish nutrient balance. And they said this: supplementation is advisable for everyone. So that people that are sharing the screen and seeing what we're looking at, someone got the idea for what's called organophosphate pesticides originating in Nazi Germany. And if you could imagine that they found these concentration camps where they killed people, where they used these horrible poisons, these nerve gases, and someone said, oh my, these things are really hard to break down. What are we going to do with them without intoxicating the world? And someone said, oh, I know, we'll just use them at very low doses. We'll spray them on the food that we eat and use them as herbicides, insecticides, fungicides. But not realizing we're at the top of the food chain. We don't wash all that off, and even genetically modified, we splice it in. So every single day, this is now a proven fact, we're all being exposed to toxins just through air, food, and water. And so you got to go the extra mile to make sure all those things are clean. And you also need to go the extra mile to clean out your body. And that nutrition pyramid, starting with foods, superfoods, functional foods, a good multi, probiotics, the resolving form of omega-3, and a combination of D3, K2. I've got a guy that now, I did a consult this morning. He's several years post-cancer surgery survival. And we've been, supplementing every rung of the pyramid. And he's been doing well for years. And he said, Bob, can I cut back my dose? I said, of course. Our goal is, once we get you out of trouble, is to keep you out of trouble. And it's easier to stay out of trouble than get out of trouble. Now that your numbers are good, let's cut it back and make sure that they stay good. So, does someone need to supplement forever? Well, you can take a break now and then, but if you want to be your best self, you can't be if you're not putting in the best fuel for you and allowing your body to use it with the nutrients that are critical for the processing.
I heard on a podcast, correct me if I'm mistaken on this, Dr. Bob, with this source, but that if we lack nutrient status within the body, our body is so intelligent that will literally extract nutrients from our bones and our tissues to survive, and in turn will weaken the entire structure, and muscle, of course. Yeah. So we literally eat ourselves alive if we don't fuel ourselves for progress.
Well, and that starts after 14 or 16 hours, interestingly enough.
With that's autophagy, right?
Yep.
But I guess that's good. That has a lot of benefit to that aspect when it comes to those additional dead cells or energy sapping cells within the system. Could you share a little bit about that, actually, just because that is something that I think people stress about as well, is knowing when to eat and also setting themselves up for failure at the start of the day by eating a highly sugared, highly processed, grain-oriented, or even fruit first thing in the morning. I often caution someone having fruit first thing in the morning because it can tend to set them up for the entire day when it comes to their sugar levels, which in turn is going to maybe perhaps cause a stress response in the person unless they've adapted. But I'd love you just to lean in a bit on that idea, Dr. Bob, around the fasting windows and how this process of eating ourselves actually works.
Well, when you do it wisely, smartly, as science has proven, you can actually have a benefit. And so the journal Carcinogenesis, The Origin of Cancer, 1999, published in a calorie-restricted state, when the body has to eat itself to survive, the first cell it eats are pre-malignant, pre-cancer, and malignant cancer cells. And that seemed to be a really good thing. And then, whatever it was, 17 years later, a guy was nominated for a Nobel Prize when the body does realize if you're healthy, if you have good choices, if you're controlled, your body will sacrifice dead and dying or sick cells. But keep in mind, most people aren't fasting. They're putting in calories that don't serve them. And so guess what? These cells that are sick, especially cancer cells, they're hogs. They'll steal the food from their neighbors. So, there's a book called Starving Cancer. And if you eat like you and I eat, not perfectly all the time, but better than 90% of the time, we're consistently starving cancer, even if we're eating, because we're eating leans, greens, nuts, and seeds, not spiking the blood sugar. I've told people with carbs, you got to earn your carbs. And the best way to earn your carbs is with intense physical exercise. And that's a good time to get them. So, you're right. The fruit in the morning thing, there was a book written in the 80s called Fit for Life. And they said, look, your body's going through a detox cycle. What if you only ate high water content food? Fruit's 90% water up until noon. And if you don't have a yeast problem and you don't have a blood sugar problem, you might actually detox. But keep in mind, fruit is not the ultimate food. Meat, egg, and milk are the ultimate sources of protein. Protein comes from the Greek word, which means of primary importance. If you don't take in what's most important to you, guess what? You're not going to have good result. So that's one thing we need to be conscious of. And by the way, even vegans, right? There's plenty of people that say we should never mistreat animals. You and I are in that same camp. But keep in mind, I was at a fire walk with an Indian chief years ago, and he would talk about how, they pray for the buffaloes. Great Spirit, honor the buffalo, that buffalo that's ready, for this transition to take care of our tribe and help us make the world better. Let him be available and let us use every bit of that buffalo and not hurt anything else. And I thought, what a great prayer. What if we approached every day like that? Hey, when it's time for all of us to serve our purpose, why not serve it in the most complete way possible? And they felt they had a partnership with the buffalo, and part of that was they were going to create food and warmth, from the meat and from the pelt, but also they were going to do great things for the world, and they were never going to abuse that relationship. I guess if you had to really define the fall of man, it would be abusing relationships. And we really need to stop that, starting with our own relationship with ourselves. Stop abusing ourselves.
Yeah. And speaking of which, you just mentioned about that vigorous exercise and putting yourself in a stressed state, a controlled stressed state, in order for this process to happen, which I touched on earlier, was hormesis. Obviously, this representation mentioned through plants, but the same concept really happens with us. Is when we're looking to put on lean body mass, we have to expose our tissues to a degree of resistance. Also for our heart to expand, for our lung function to expand, our VO2 max to expand, which is a great representation of our strength as well as our grip strength. We have to work on these functions in the body and push ourselves. We're in a convenient age now where everything is so damn convenient, whether it's getting food delivered to your house, or in some places you can go onto Amazon and bang, you can get something delivered in the same day. You don't even have to walk to the shops anymore, or people are taking escalators when they should be taking the stairs, or whatever it is. There's conveniences everywhere, but I don't see them as conveniences. I actually enjoy the stairs. I actively look for creative ways to move differently because I'm curious about those things, and I enjoy the struggle. I enjoy that stress, because there will come a time where that stress may be more difficult for me had I not done the reps, had I not leaned in, had I not said the work has to be done, because this is a priceless machine. You know how priceless it is, Dr. Bob. You're healing right now, and you've always asked a lot of yourself physically, but a lot of people don't. And I think it's one of the biggest tragedies. But if you really look at how it affects stress, even some of the studies here, actually, before I go on and off on a bit of tangent here and a rant, I told you I had this extra reishi latte, Dr. Bob. I'll go off on one, so apologies about that. But if you want to just address hormesis, first of all, what does this process mean, and why is it so important when it comes to stress?
Well, it's essentially how your body, or any being, adapts to stress. And so, for instance, if we were to take organic plants versus non-organic plants, the non-organic plants Their stress is toxins. They spray them with herbicides, insecticides, fungicides. And so the plant never actually has to develop an immune system. And now we're beginning to realize that when we eat a plant, we get the information from the plant. We get the immune system of the plant. But if the plant never developed an immune system, now we don't get an immune system from the plant. And so, one of the things that's catching attention lately are things like cold plunges. And someone thought, why would anybody put their body in freezing cold water? There's few things more miserable than that. But reality is, it's going to change your body and your resilience very, very fast. So there's Wim Hof. He swam for a couple hours in the Arctic Ocean. That was you and I in Portugal. And it was a cooler evening, but there we are earthing and letting the coolness of the air just energize us, so to speak, right? And if you're moving, and we were contracting muscles and breathing, all that works. Wim Hof came up with an amazing breathing method that he borrowed from the Tibetan monks that they called fire breathing. But I found this fascinating. I went on a little binge on cold exposure lately. The longest any human has ever been in direct contact with ice and lived to tell it was something like 3 hours and 17 minutes. So part of what I was sharing there is that environment trumps willpower. If you put someone on ice for 4 hours, they're going to suffer damage or even die. So, even a guy like Wim Hof, he didn't have the record, by the way. It was a guy from Poland that had the 3 hour and 17-minute record. So, we want to give ourselves stressors that challenge us, but stressors that we're up for the challenge. So, you and I wouldn't try to go swim in the Arctic Ocean, for 2 hours wearing nothing but a Speedo. I don't think either of us would come out, but could we dive into a cold lake? Yeah, we could do that. We could dive into a cold lake and paddle around for a minute or two and then get out and get warm, and our body would benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. And for you, some of you guys who struggle to show up to the gym and struggle to make that as part of your daily stress reducing protocol, you just have to look on PubMed if you're not taking our word for it. And I believe there's over 57,000 studies on stress and exercise over the years. So it's unanimous. Get it done. Even if you start out walking and working on basic mobility, I always encourage people to focus on those primal pattern movement patterns that even Paul Chek talks about are the squat pattern, the bending pattern, the twisting pattern, the lunging pattern, the pulling, the pushing, and working on your gait, working on how you move, how you hold your body posture can go a long, long way for reducing your stress. I actually spoke to a gentleman, Dr. Mike, Posture Mike on Instagram, Dr. Bob, recently. Really great guy, but he was so broken up in his personal life journey that it inspired him to become focused and passionate about posture, and started teaching people about the importance of posture and the connections with stress. And it's just amazing to see the connection with that, and that if people don't associate their physical well-being with the way they address stress, they're really missing out so much of this puzzle that, well, it's not really a puzzle, is it? But it is a challenge. It's certainly a challenge for everyone, but the consistency of movement, we cannot stress enough how important that is for people. But I would just love to, I know you're experiencing this firsthand again, because you're not able to move the way you would like to with our animal flow and all these different things, but we have to adapt, right? We have to control the stress. We have to accept that the body has gone to a point where we have to adapt, but appreciate everything within that realm. But let's talk about, medicinal mushrooms, Dr. Bob. We've been sharing reishi for many, many years, guys. And if you're in this group and you're watching this recording, you most certainly have seen about reishi. For either you've been added to this group or you're on YouTube and you're watching this. We have our one box experience for everyone can try this. Tell us about reishi, Dr. Bob. This is a medicinal mushroom. It's been in Chinese culture, but why is this so powerful for stress, along with some of the other medicinal mushrooms that we talk so passionately about?
Well, one, it actually is given the term, the herb of spiritual potency, and also the herb of immortality, but it lowers stress in the body. It literally took them until 2022 to find out that it actually lowers the amount of circulating stress hormones. It promotes calmness in the brain. It actually has the same calming effect for the brain as a prescription dose of Valium, which is a drug that has significant downside to it. So you get the upside without the downside. We were talking about inflammation a bit, and it's anti-inflammatory by more than 15 different mechanisms. I like the previous slide before this when you were showing Tiger Woods lining up a putt. And interestingly enough, I've given it to my professional golfers, and they'll take reishi before the round, usually in the form of a latte. They kind of like to get that brain and body pickup. And when they have that on board, they putt better because they're focused on the greens. And that's been proven. If you can keep the brain calm on the green, you can putt better. And even at a high level, it can be as many as 3 putts per round. And you have a 3 or 4 round golf tournament. That's the difference between winning millions and not even being in the money. So it's pretty significant there. But simply, I think everybody should put this in their body every day. But now here's the biggest challenge. People are creatures of habits. So I would often ask at seminars, how many of you enjoy taking supplements every day? If I have 200 people in the audience, maybe one person raises their hand and says, I do. And then I actually call them out on it. Wait a minute. I know you take the supplements and I know you're good for them, but do you actually enjoy the process? And most people say, no, I don't want to open up the bottles. I don't want to count out the pills. I don't want to wash them down one by one. Well, what if you had the top superfood in the planet with all the nutrients that you need, all in a way that you consistently do every day anyway, like coffee or tea? And people have come to realize, wait a minute, this is a really, really good way to get this in our body. And then you showed a picture of lion's mane. So we have coffee that has reishi, has lion's mane, has cordyceps. We've got green tea. By the way, we had an energy drink for a while that was reishi, cordyceps, lion's mane. We now have another partnership where that's coming back. We don't have a time window on it, but now we figured out we've got a partner that meets our organic standards, our ability to produce in a way that serves everybody. So some of the products that did disappear because of supply chain challenges are coming back. And here's what I'll tell you. If you want the best of the best, reach out to whoever invited you to this replay or live and let them know. Have our one box experience, because if you're like most people, you have that box and you realize, okay, this is a much better choice for me. Even if you don't realize it, intellectually get it, and then ultimately your body will get it. It is a much better choice for you.
Absolutely. I had some new friends come over the other day for a coffee. They had numerous coffees, in fact, but they felt so good after their first 2 cups. They were super excited to try multiple box experiences, so they became a new customer. But it was interesting just to see their energy shift right before our very eyes within their first cup. And not everyone will notice that shift, especially if their system is quite stressed. What I've noticed is that if people are very adamant with their nutrition, they're very active, there is a higher likelihood you will notice a shift because you're more connected usually to those workings of the body. But if someone is really stressed, you mentioned earlier about the stress reset or stress release protocol, depending on where you are in the world because of melatonin. I just love you to just touch on this just a little bit more, Dr. Bob, with the combination of reishi spores. What is the spores? Why is it so potent? And why is it this combo of L-theanine, melatonin, and spores work so beautifully over the last 15, I guess, plus 15 years in your clinic to really put the brakes on stress?
All right, so let's deal with these things one at a time. The spores are the most potent part of the plant. We have an extreme competitive advantage. Most companies don't have spores because they grow their reishi in plastic bags and they're not healthy enough to reproduce. Even if they do have spores, they have about 1/7 at most the bioavailability, because we have a patented process by which we extract the nutrients that can't be copied. And I learned early on that these spores were far better than any other form of reishi. People can take capsules repeatedly, like every waking hour. We go with theanine. That's an amino acid in green tea. It's something that's called a natural GABA facilitator, promotes the most calming brain chemistry. The nice thing about GABA is it makes you calm without making you tired. And then we go to melatonin. And the interesting thing about melatonin is that it's anti-cancer now by more than 10 different mechanisms. Plants have melatonin. Single-celled organisms like amoebas have melatonin. They now know it's absolutely critical throughout all of biology to have this on board. And there's even 10 different anti-cancer properties. And one of those properties is going to be reducing the amount of stress that the body's under. And, as melatonin does that, people start to feel a whole lot better. And people say, well, which one should I do? Melatonin, theanine, or the spores? And I would ask, why would you limit yourself? Why not do all three? Because I can tell you, the results we get are so much faster, so much more thorough. And I'm going to even go not necessarily out on a limb to say for some of the people that have done this, it's been life-saving. And they admit that too, where they were on such a bad spiral down that they didn't think they'd live another year. And suddenly they're now planning their next decades. And that's certainly what we're all here to do, right? Help people get the most out of their life.
Absolutely. So if you've been added to this group by one of our ambassador partners, you can go directly to them to get reishi spores. But for the stress resetter release, there are different people that would need to be connected to Dr. Bob to get that in whatever region they're actually in. Do we have a particular path to
Dream
get those
Coast
people on these? Yeah.
Yep. Dream Coast, all one word, GDREAM Coast, COAST.SE, like Sweden. And you'll find the stress reset there. And our partner who felt her life was saved by this and likely was, Camilla Hiller. Great story. You can see her story on the page, but put the stress reset in your body. You'll be happy you did.
Beautiful. So just to wrap up then, guys, we have our medicinal mushrooms in all beverage form. We've got some nice specials coming up this month as well in the US. We've got, I think it's a 12% special offer as well on certain products. So keep an eye out for that in the group. I think your darling wife and partner, Kelly, may have posted some information about that already this week. The Royal then is the triple blend medicinal mushroom coffee we have. This is being quite special. Delighted we recently got this in Portugal, Dr. Bob, because it initially wasn't allowed in because it wasn't classified as a coffee. It was classified as a food supplement. Yeah. So it took a while, it took an extra few months to get this in here, but this is great. I find this is really great for cognitive function. And, guys, if you have struggled with your movement journey and struggled with your stress, you can combine all of this into a protocol that you can do every day from your home with support, with Dr. Bob's support and education on nutrition, going deeper on how medicinal mushrooms can help on your stress journey, your fat loss journey, your pain journey. And we have a 30-day program called Warrior 30 that you guys can partake in. So we have different entrances for different people, whether you're looking to just reduce body pain and increase that mobility and work gently, or people who would really want to focus on that body composition. Then there are options for people here for, simple accessibility to this program. We're super proud of this and to be able to work with Dr. Bob on this as well. So if you want to try our one box experience and you haven't already, please put a coffee mug in the comments on this video, guys, and whoever added you to the group will make sure that that referral goes back to that ambassador. And if you need information on Warrior 30 and want to add this to your protocol for stress and for fat loss coming into the summer months, put a bicep show in there in the comments and we'll get some information to you. So Dr. Bob, just so great to have you on the call here. Just go and do what you have to do. Really appreciate you showing up today, guys. If you've any questions on this topic, please put them in the thread. I don't see any questions here apart from how do we know when that process has happened. I'm not sure what that was in relation to. If you want to re-ask that question or specify what it is before we wrap up, would be great. Great to see Jacob is watching on YouTube, I think it is here.
All right.
So excellent stuff. Yeah. So I don't see that question being focused. I'll leave the last comment to you, Dr. Bob. Anything you want to close up on stress? What are your last nuggets of wisdom for those people who want to conquer their struggle with stress?
Well, recognize that it's a universal struggle. And I think it is the number one cause of death, not just today, but likely always throughout humankind. I have elites and we're talking about world champions, or we're talking, people that have really mastered what they're doing in life and business, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars, under their management. And you know what? The thing that they most consistently repeat is the stress reset. And once they do it, they ask, how often can I do that? Can I do a stress reset weekend once a month? Why not? If you want to take your game up to the next level, it's a sure way to do it. You get the melatonin, the theanine, hopefully through the stress reset drops, do the reishi spores through us because it's the best on the market. And why not treat yourself with some of the best healthy coffee and tea in the world? And then there's the other part of it, right? Thursday, we're going to talk. There's a business behind this. We built a global enterprise and we keep investing in it. But reality is, whatever you want to achieve in your life, health, wealth, friendship, whatever it is, I think we've got something for you. In fact, I know we do. Let's connect and see if it's a good fit.
Beautiful. Just that question on clarification was on eating of the bones. I guess brittle bones or osteoporosis showing up would be the extreme end of that, Dr. Bob. But I guess breakage easily or just feeling that sense of weakness perhaps in your joints. I would imagine that would be some degree of awareness of that.
It may or may not be. You know, I've got somewhere I should put it on my YouTube, and I think maybe it is, but I had a woman who had full-blown osteoporosis at age 25. So we put her on a program to alkalize. By the way, reishi is the most alkaline food on the planet. We gave her comprehensive bone builder because bone just doesn't have calcium. It has dozens of minerals and over 200 proteins. And bone meal has the minerals and the protein. Then when we alkalize the body, she put 18% bone density on, DEXA confirmed in a year, which the doctors had never heard anything like that. So there's always a natural strategy. And part of that, of course, was exercise. You know, if you stimulate weight bearing on your bones have to respond by getting thicker. If you're sitting around all day, well, you don't need thick bones. They'll probably waste away for you. So learn to enjoy moving your body. Warrior 30, by the way, jump in with that. I think you're going to love it. And let's get you better.
Beautiful. Awesome. Thank you for the questions, guys. Thank you, Dr. Bob. We will see you on Thursday for a conversation around business and entrepreneurship. For any of you guys who are interested in that, check out our Why Organo group. That will be focus streaming into that group. So thank you, Dr. Bob. Thank you, guys. We'll see you next week for another dose of Ask the Doctor. So have an epic day. Ciao for now.
Ciao for now.